Illinois Stories is brought to you by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by the support of viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello, welcome to Illinois Stories. I'm Mark McDonald at the Adams County Fairgrounds at the Lewis Round Barn, which just happens to be 100 years old this year. It has a remarkable history, including the mammoth job of moving this barn here. Let's take a look inside. George Lewis, as we stand in this remarkable round barn, which is 100 years old this year, it gives you a chance to think back on your family, the Lewis family, and your grandpa who built this barn.
That's Charles Edward
Charles
Lewis.
Edward Lewis.
And
he had a farm not too far from here in
about
Minden.
20 miles
Yeah.
between Camp Point and Clayton in Adams County.
Yeah. And the round barn, even back in 1914, it was a curiosity, wasn't it?
Very much a curiosity. It was really one of a time in the whole United States. It was, in a sense, copied after the round barns at the University of Illinois in Champaign. They're much smaller dairy farms. But grandfather hired Lambert Hubert to be the carpenter, and he turned out to be an architect who developed the plans for this self-supporting roof over the entire barn and a freestanding silo in the center.
Wow.
He said he lost many nights of sleep by trying to dream up how to do that. And he did it very successfully.
Wow. And in fact, it took note around the country, didn't it? Because this picture shows, this was from a Better Farming magazine.
No, this is from the Chicago Daily News.
The Chicago Daily News.
At the time, way back in 1944. And that article said that the round barn here was the largest round barn in Illinois, and today it's one of the largest, one of the few largest in the whole United States.
Yeah. As we go through this program, we're going to also talk about the task of moving the barn from the family farm to where it is here on the Adams County Fairgrounds. But that's not anything that you need to address right now. I want to show Grandpa here. Here's the man, your grandpa here.
That was grandfather in
Right here.
his younger years, and he's the one that envisioned needing a big barn in order to feed about 200 head of cattle that he would buy each year from the west, Kansas, Nebraska, and he would bring them in on the train, and he wanted a barn that he could feed both silage and hay at the same time.
He was a very ambitious young man, wasn't he?
He had to be.
Yeah, and he had lots of, your family was big. He had lots of brothers and sisters.
There were 12 in his family. He was the youngest of 12.
Wow.
And then my grandmother, who married him, was also one of 12. And so there were 24 altogether in that family.
Yeah, and here's a good picture of him and his wife in later years, because that they moved, didn't they?
When he retired from actually farming the ground where the round barn was, then he moved to Camp Point, and this was his house in Camp Point, and the buggy that he and his wife were riding in. Grandfather never owned a car. I learned just a few months ago that he drove from Camp Point to the round barn farm in the buggy or a sleigh in the wintertime and on horseback, and he would go every day to the round barn farm.
Yeah, and this is evidence that this was eventually placed on the National Registry of Historic Places, right?
Yes, in 1984, it then was successfully placed on the National Register. But when it was moved, they then declassified it on the National Register, and after it was moved, we then applied again to have it replaced on the National Register. So that it would still remain a National Historic Site.
Yeah, and you and your brothers and sisters all had to come to an agreement at some point that you were going to give this wonderful landmark to the Adams County Fairground.
My father was given, well, he actually bought it out of the estate, the Round Barn Farm. And then he and my mother gave it, after when they were deceased, they gave it to the 18 of us, 9 children and our spouses. So all 18 had an ownership in the Round Barn Farm and the barn. And then we decided, since our farm operation was no longer raising cattle or hogs, that we wanted it to be preserved for future generations. And we then decided to give it to the old time, the Adams County Old Time Association. We needed to have a vote of the family as to whether to do this, so we had a vote when we all got together. There were 18 of us, and the vote was 17-1 to give it. My brother,
there's always one in there.
My brother-in-law, who was an Air Force colonel and doctor, he voted against it until he got his 1/18 share of the state grant that paid for moving the barn. He was joking, of course, but we all were very happy that the Old Time Association accepted the barn. And now you can see that it's being well preserved. The activities are just fantastic, and they are preserving the history of agriculture in Adams County.
Well, thank you for telling us the story. It's terrific. Thank you. Willie, you and a very ambitious crew decided back in 1999, now that this was a gift to the Old Time Association, you had to decide how to get it here. It wasn't that easy, was it?
No, it wasn't.
George said it was the biggest round barn in Illinois, and I believe that. And so first you have to, okay, now we have to figure out how to take it apart and move it. And I don't know how you all decided to do that.
Well, many engineers looked at it. Many of different contractors looked at it, and many of them walked away. But we found finally 2 or 3 engineers that worked with us. And we found a group of Amish people that would help and go ahead and start on it. It took about 3 to 4 months to get this all lined out.
No kidding. Is that all?
Well, that's about the winter of '98 and '99 when we was working on this.
You know, you can't show all the entire process, but you can show sort of how. Here you can see that you've taken a lot of the siding off already, and you had to start removing these pieces in like pie shapes, didn't you?
That's correct. The roof come off in pie shape. Of course, before that, we went ahead and had to strip the shingles and had to take the cupola off that was of there. It wasn't too good a condition. And from there on, we got this crane and it kept taking them off in pie shapes. Went all the way around, and of course, as you can imagine, as old as this was, some of those didn't want to come off all in one piece.
Oh yeah, but you got to save as much wood as you can, right?
That's correct.
Because you want to put the original wood back on. You don't want to have to put new wood on there.
That's correct.
Wow.
Most of this was all of one of the species of oak. As far as the roof and the trusses and that is concerned.
Yeah. And then when you got, I find this very interesting. When you got the dome off, of course you found, you isolated the silo, which we're looking at now, and that silo's 40 feet high, right?
That's correct. That silo was 40 foot, and that's what helped support the middle roof of this barn. And of course, after we got all the pie shape of the trusses off, then we had to go ahead and deal with this. This took 2 cranes to go ahead, after we supported it so it wouldn't collapse, to go ahead and lay it down. And we laid this down on a 4-axle Donahue, pulled by a tractor, and this is how it got moved, is 20-some miles. And of course, there was a lot of things in between. There was small culverts and then muddy fields and things like this that we encountered that we had to move across. But we made it, and this silo here, I might also mention, it's 40 foot, and there isn't any knots in any of this Douglas fir. This lumber was come from the south, and like I say, it's all one length, 40 feet.
Each one of these planks is 40 feet long.
Can you
imagine the grove of trees, this monumental grove of trees that must have come from?
Just mind-boggling.
Yeah, 40 feet in one piece. Wow. Well, that's one reason why you're able to move it successfully, I guess, right?
Yes, because there isn't any knots in any of the boards, so that helped a lot.
And then now you're putting it back together, and of course the silo would have to go first because that's the center pin, so to speak.
That's
I guess,
correct.
Isn't it? So you poured some concrete and in it goes.
Right.
When it was supported before, it probably wasn't supported by concrete.
It
probably
was
had a
on blocks.
On blocks.
Yes.
Okay. And here the building starts to go up around it.
Correct.
Wow.
Yeah, just keep it going. And
Starting the roof, and here's your pie-shaped piece again, going back in just the way you took it out.
I had to put a new ring on the top there to go ahead and lay all these pie-shaped pieces on.
Oh my goodness.
And this is what supports it.
And how many of you were working on this project, Willie?
Well, there was about 8 people that was really up on the roof all times, and there was probably about that many on the ground. And trying to make sure the right pieces went the right places again.
You mentioned the cupola, and here it is. You're dropping it into place. That's still up there, not today, I guess.
Yes,
isn't it?
that's the new one that we went ahead and had built, because the other one wasn't quite fit to put back up, and that took approximately a day and a half to set. It was very interesting to get that up there that high, and go ahead and secure it.
Okay, then here you've got the shingles
Yes,
on, so you've reshingled that the roof.
put all new sheeting on over top of the old oak, and in between time we had to add quite a bit of oak here and there that needed some support, and it worked out really good. It just fell in place, but it took time.
Yeah, yeah. When you walk into this barn now, do you have these flashbacks all the time?
I'll look at a certain section and say, oh, I know why we did this way, or I know why we changed this and did it this way. I can remember most of them.
Yeah, yeah. And when you come in here on a day and it's full of school kids running around in here, it makes you feel good, doesn't it?
Oh, yes. Yes, they can't imagine, how this was back when it was built.
Yeah.
And of course, I might add, when it was built, when this silo was in here, the way it is, when they used to fill it full of corn silage, they had a bunk all the way around the middle edge of it. You had to fork it out of the silo and feed the cattle right around it. So you can imagine all this here, how much traffic it would get from cattle, and how much cleaning out that they had to do every day or every week or two.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's part of a successful farm, though, right?
Yes.
Food in, food out, and keep it going, right?
That's correct. Yeah. Yes, and it was a lot of manpower here that had to, and then the loss above us here, that was all loose hay they put.
Yeah, yeah, and we're now it's demonstration area, and we're going to take a tour of it. But when it was being used as a barn, of course, that was hay. That was hay storage, wasn't it?
That was all bulk hay. It wasn't no bales. It was just pure loose hay. They put up there all the time with the teams. And of course, some of the pictures that you'll see around here, it'll show the cattle around the barn, and it'll show different guys feeding them here and there. And that brings back old memories, but it's been a long time ago.
Yeah. Willie, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Well, Willie, now the round barn is used as an educational place rather than a workplace of animals and farmers. And what you have down here is some very interesting old implements that when the kids and other interested people come through here, they get a look at the way life was on the farm from early 1900s through the middle 1900s, I guess. Huh?
Yes.
And I'm really fascinated by this tool right here because your very father used to use this one to get ice off the Mississippi River.
That's correct. They used to go down in the wintertime and used to use this. They hook either a mule or a horse to it, and they cut blocks of ice out so they could have ice as long as they could have it, maybe as in their ice house up to August of the following year.
No kidding. They could hold it that long.
If they got enough of it in there.
Yeah. And they just, how would they insulate it? How would they keep it?
Sometimes they put straw on top of it. Sometimes they put sawdust on top of it. And that went ahead and gave us some insulation. They always try to cut the blocks out of there about a foot to foot and a half wide, not no deeper than a foot deep, and then whatever it jagged out, and then finish using a handsaw one here to go ahead and cut it out to maybe 2 foot square or something like this, because that was a pretty good chunk to go ahead and have 2 or 3 people put up on a farm wagon and haul all the way home.
And you say that your dad, sometimes that the ice on the Mississippi might have been as much as 2 feet thick.
That's correct. That's what I was always told.
Wow.
That's what they said. And there'd be a crew go down there. They might go down there maybe once or twice a week and spend a month down there getting the ice for several different homesteads there.
I'll be darned.
And it was very interesting.
Walk with me this way because we got some other things to see here. We can't see everything because this is a living museum here, but when we were standing in front of the silo earlier, this barn, we were mentioning the fact that the silage sometimes would be blown up through pipes into the top and then it would drop down.
Correct. And
gravity would feed it down so the animals could get to it. And this is a good example of how that was done.
Yes, this is one here. They went ahead and hand-fed their corn stalks to it and would chop it, blow it, and go up to the top of the silo and fall down, and that's how they filled silo.
You kind of got to envision, if you can, that pipe there would extend all the way up to the top of the silo.
That's
right?
correct.
And it would blow up through that pipe and then fall down into the gravity feed down.
Yes, that's
neat.
That was really, really nice. In the early and middle 1900s there when they used that. Of course, the new ones now are a lot different.
Yeah. And then, of course, everybody who had animals were trying to keep enough hay for them, right? And,
yes.
And this level right above us was where the hay was stored in this round barn. But these variety of instruments here were all for raising hay, cutting hay, mowing hay, turning hay. And the one in the back there, the green one, that was when your hay, when you needed to cut your hay, you'd hook your team up to that and it'd mow it, I guess, huh?
Yes, that was what you call a mower. And then the one right in front of it here was a tedder to go ahead and get it some air after a couple days.
That's this one right here.
Yes, that's this one
And a tedder,
here.
what does that, just turn it?
It just goes ahead and fluffs it up,
Uh-huh.
raises it up off of the ground, especially in high humidity days. It would go ahead and give it some air, and it would dry a lot quicker. And that's where they could go ahead and load it and put it in the barn quicker before it rained again.
So if you could get it turned, then it would dry out, and then eventually what you'd want to do is put it in hay rows.
Yes.
I guess that's what the rake was for.
Yes, that's
And
what
again, this would be pulled by a mule or a horse or something.
Correct, yes. This here was about the first one that I can ever remember hearing about. And this is all made out of wood.
Yeah.
And they used it for their timothy and their other grasses and that. And it worked real well.
Fascinating. Well, Leon Obert, you may not have been fortunate enough to been in on the moving of this barn. I don't know if you were or not. What a monumental task that must have been.
I was definitely around. I wasn't a member of the association at the time, but definitely was around to see it go up.
And you were familiar with the activities that was going on. I
Oh,
bet you there was a lot
absolutely.
of buzz about moving this barn.
Oh, there
wasn't
was, and it got comical. I think the windstorms came through a couple of times and knocked part of it down. They had to go back and do some restructuring. So yeah, it took a while, but yeah, it was quite neat to see it go up. And of course, today what it is awesome.
When you get into the barn now, it's used as an educational facility now. For the Old Time Association uses it for field trips and keeps it open to the public. And what it's become is sort of a monument to 1930s life on the farm.
That is correct.
Yeah.
It's a museum, and it's opened every second Sunday from May through October.
Yeah.
Definitely, we bring school children through here. It's open for any organization that would like to come in and view it by appointment.
Oh, it's
so
neat.
it's really awesome, and
Yeah.
they've done a great job on it. A couple of people have been very instrumental in getting it all organized and get it into the point it is today.
Yeah. One of the first exhibits you see is a lot of the farms in the 1930s still might not have had phone service. Some may have, but this is what they would have been dealing with back then. They didn't have the smartphone on their hip or right in their side pocket.
Yeah, it's comical. Today everyone has a phone on their pocket, whether they're 7 years old or 80 years old.
Yeah.
But you had party lines even back in the day where you'd have several people sharing the same line, and if you were quiet enough, you usually could get on there and listen to them. I mean, as young as I am, we had a party line when I was a kid, and we used to enjoy listening to the old women on the other line. And of course, they'd hear us make a snicker or something, and want us to get off.
They probably recognized your voice too, and they were going to talk to
that's
your
right.
mother
But,
about this.
The phones have definitely changed. Of course, there's still some landlines out there, but most everybody's gone to cordless phones.
And then you would have used one of these to ring up the switchboard operator.
That is correct.
Who would have
And
had
then-
these earphones on and been sitting here ready to switch your call to where it needed to go.
And she probably knew the gossip better than the actual papers as far as what was
my
going on in the
goodness.
community by
Yeah.
just listening in on everyone, whether
Yeah.
she was supposed to be doing that or not. What's happening. But Yeah, it's quite, you get a weird look at a lot of the school kids when they come through here and you explain the phone system, how it was and where it is today. It's just very hard for them to realize you had to operate it like this.
Upstairs you have recreated the 1930s rural Illinois.
That's correct.
So let's go up there and
It's a
take a look.
1930s farmhouse.
Yeah, okay. After you, sir. I love walking up these old steps, Leon. You know, when you think about the 100 years old, there's been a lot of feet have trod those steps.
That's correct.
We mentioned 1930s rural Illinois.
Yes,
The first thing you see is like the backyard.
Yes, this is just basically the way it would have been. The loft is pretty much created as a 1930s farmstead home. This is basically what you consider wash day. Of course, you would have to heat the water and put it in tubs and use the scrub boards. It's none of the modern day conveniences as we have them today. And usually your clothes dryer consisted of a couple of lines strung between two large trees, and all the clothes would definitely have to be pinned on there.
There's a chance that since none of this, of course, was electrically operated, it was all manual. So on a nice day, you might just haul all this stuff out in the backyard.
Sure.
Do your work outside, hang it up outside, and that way you wouldn't have to.
Heat the water on a portable heat stove, and definitely just do it by hand. There was no way around it. Usually they would start out with the cleanest of the dirtiest clothes and start out with that and end up with probably the overalls and stuff that were actually the
and
dirtiest.
Never really get clean because they'd have the old dirty water,
to change
right?
the water. And, you know.
I love the porch. After you got finished, of course, you might be lucky enough to go in and get a sandwich or something. You'd go through the porch, you got the cats on the porch.
Yep, that's
there.
just pretty much how you'd see the porch at a farmhouse. You know, you'd have cats probably strung all over the place.
Oh,
they
yeah.
had multiple cats, of course, on the farm to help keep mice
They
down.
controlled your mice, yeah.
And you know, plenty of milk usually because there were dairy farmers out there, and
Yeah.
they usually had the milk.
And this is what the kitchen would have looked like.
Yeah, you
This
would have
is-
walked in out off the porch, usually right into the kitchen. So the kitchen, of course, as you see it today, is much different. Back then, the cook stove was called a cook stove. We call it a stove now. Runs on electric or gas usually.
But that would have been heated by wood.
wood or coal.
And,
yes.
and I love the ice box here on our left.
The ice box, yes. Willie talked earlier about cutting ice down on the
Yeah.
river. Well, that's exactly what they were cutting it for. They'd put a big chunk of ice in this bottom door, and that would help generate the coolness to keep the rest of the ice box cool, to keep the vegetables and stuff.
And of course, we mentioned the old phones too. This is
Phone?
this would have been an early model. Once you got used to having that, you couldn't do without it.
You're right, yep. And I don't think we ever would want to go back without one as well. But
No, I don't think so.
you know, you don't see a lot of kitchen cabinetry or anything in this kitchen. I mean, that's basically was your kitchen cupboard, they called it, where you kept all your baking goods. And of course, you had your pull out where you'd roll your dough and stuff if you're getting ready to bake a pie or whatever the case may be. But country kitchens usually had fresh eggs from the farm and fresh milk from the cows. And of course, a lot of them did their own butchering back then as well. So it was definitely probably one of the best places in a farmhouse was the kitchen.
Yeah, yeah.
A lot of decisions were made around the table.
It's still the most popular room in the house, even though we don't have to work near as hard in the kitchen.
But
as we
usually
used to.
people carry in a lot of the food nowadays to the kitchen.
They sure do. If you were fortunate enough to have a living room, this would have been the living room, the oval braided rug, of course, and a fireplace. There was probably a fireplace in every room where they could afford to have one, because that coal or wood would have been the heat source.
And you know, the old radio was about the only source of entertainment. There wasn't really much TV around. Everybody gathered around the radio and listened to
look at the size of that radio. Look at the
shows,
size of that thing.
So.
And you always fell into bed tired because you had to make everything on the farm.
Yep.
So you went to bed early, you got up early, and you probably slept really well.
Yep, and you know, they usually had outdoor potties, so it wasn't uncommon to see a commode.
Well, we see that in the corner. That's interesting,
correct.
because that's built right into the chair.
Yep.
And so that's, you just go ahead and somebody, they probably took turns in the morning as to who emptied it.
Yes,
Always
whoever
got
got up
emptied in the
first had to go out and get rid of the mess from the night before.
And I love this. Okay, you know, every town, no matter how small, probably had a beauty shop. And this particular one is almost scary when you look at the appliances that women would put their heads into.
It definitely is scary. It reminds me of the Walton show where Mama Walton got her hair fixed, and I remember that being one of the episodes where she got wired up to a machine much like that. And of course, if they didn't turn them off soon enough, you know, you had a chance of actually frying the ends of your hair.
Well, it says, please do not touch. I'm not going anywhere near that, I can tell you that.
I can't imagine sitting in there with damp hair and then being hooked up to electric. I mean, it's just, it's quite interesting.
You'd have to trust your beautician, wouldn't you? I'll tell you what, there wasn't any television. There wasn't much radio, much on radio anyway. So the women got together. And they probably knew more about each other's families than anybody else.
Mark, they'd have names for most of these quilts. This one, I'm told, is called the bow tie quilt. Of course, they'd use a lot of scraps, maybe old feed sacks and stuff too. They'd cut apart to make clothes or quilts. But I always tease the ladies that are working on this quilt that they should call one the gossip quilt, because I'm sure that's basically what they are by the time they're finished.
Yeah. Well, you know, it takes a long time to build a quilt, and it takes a lot of hands.
Yep.
So there's got to be a lot of chatting going on.
These are some toys and stuff, Mark, that, you know, kids probably played with back in the 1930s. A lot of the toys, of course, are handmade toys, and this one is basically a small farm setup, as you see in the back there. And there's a little goat wagon. You know, actually a live goat would pose something like that. It's for entertainment for kids.
Yeah, that's interesting. They actually called that a goat wagon, because it's probably pulled by a goat.
Yep.
But actually, a kid would ride in, and he'd keep his toys or whatever in the back.
Sure.
That's fascinating. And of course, winters were more severe back then, as we know, and there were always ice skates and sleds.
Yep.
And,
they always had snow as high as fence posts when they walked back and forth to school. You know,
that's right.
Uphill both ways, and of course, you know, I think they had a lot of entertainment with the snow like we do yet today. You know, every kid likes to still go sledding or ice skating.
Leon, thanks for this little tour. This is terrific.
Absolutely, and hopefully your organization can come back, or anyone else has an organization like to come out and check us out. They've got a great group of people here that have done a lot of great work to get this all put together. Yeah. And we appreciate you showing it to the public.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
They hold a lot of special events here at the Lewis Round Barn, but if you just want to drop by and take a look and walk through, it's open the second Sunday of every month, May through October. With another Illinois story in Adams County, I'm Mark McDonald. Thanks for watching.
Illinois Stories is brought to you by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by the support of viewers like you. Thank you. For a DVD copy of the program you've just seen, send 1995 to Network Knowledge, P.O. Box 6248, Springfield, Illinois 62708. Be sure to include the program name, subject, and when the program aired. You can also order with your credit card by calling 800-232-3605.